Hello and welcome to Free Hit, an FPL podcast. I'm your host, Chris, joined as always by my co-host, Jace. And today we are recapping not one, but two game weeks back-to-back, game week 14 to game week 15. Jace, how was your double FPL game week? I guess I shouldn't say double game week, but a week which had two game weeks within it.
Better. That's for sure. Some good returns from some solid moves made last game week. I ended that one with 89 points thanks to some solid defensive returns and captaining Salah. Obviously making up points on those who captained Palmer and those who went Gabriel and Saliba instead of Julian Timber, like me. So I was able to claw back a significant amount of rank that I lost in game week 13. This game week was not as large of a jump, but I did luckily luck into a vice captain Palmer that will turn captain since Salah didn't play due to that Merseyside derby.
Kind of like a crazy 2 game weeks. Like there was a lot happening. I was like putting together notes for this podcast and I was trying to remember what had happened midweek, and the first thing that happened was all the lineups came out. Nick Jackson, most transferred in player, game week 14, does not start against Southampton. Gabriel is not in the squad, evidently still injured. Trent was not in the starting lineup and then came on and actually got 2 assists in that crazy game against Newcastle. And then in game week 15, you and I were talking about Ollie Watkins, and that looked like the correct call during game week 14. Gets rotated for maybe like the first time ever in game week 15. Still no Gabriel. We had Everton and Liverpool canceled, which for us, Eastern time, was the middle of the night when that decision was made.
Yeah.
There was also a pretty big, in 14, Salah-Palmer captaincy split, and then in 15, a Saka-Palmer captaincy split, and both had like quite a bit of variance. And then obviously we just had the crazy Chelsea-Spurs 4-3 game in there as well. It felt like a lot of moving pieces, but also a good week to bank transfers because nobody knew what the hell was going on anyway and who was going to start. So glad you came away with some green arrows from that. And yeah, was it 14-pointer from Julian Timber in game week 14, and you also captained Salah in game week 14, which led to some outside returns given the Palmer-Salah captaincy split.
Yeah, like I said, it didn't really even matter this week because I did go with Salah, but luckily he didn't play, so I'm going to luck into the Palmer points and end up with a 74-point game week thanks to that, which is kind of exciting, which are 2 pretty decent green arrows back-to-back, which feels good. I'm still pretty annoyed with the game for the exact reasons that you just brought up, decisions made in the middle of the night. Not that it really mattered because we couldn't have done anything for our team anyways, right?
Well, we could have because
it was already set at that point, wasn't it?
Yeah, but they did not have the ability to change the deadline. So
oh, right, exactly.
The Liverpool Everton was the 7:30 a.m. kickoff. Like, of course, no one is up for that. It gets canceled, but then the deadline does not move back to 9 a.m. Eastern. It remains at 6:30 or something, 5:30, something crazy, which was frustrating. But you say you got lucky to get the Palmer points. I don't think it's luck because you could have easily vice captain Haaland or Saka this week. Like, something made you go Palmer over those 2 guys. That's still a choice given that we knew there was a possibility of that game being canceled.
Yeah, it really just forced me to pay attention to my bench a little more, right? Like, who did I want coming off the bench? And if I wanted to make a transfer to help me stomach that, if that were the case, right? So I did end up bringing in João Pedro for Raul Jimenez, which kind of leads me to the other piece of why I'm really frustrated with this game is I take out a striker who has not returned, like hasn't scored a goal in like 5 or 6 weeks. He's been dodging points left and right because he's playing one of the best defenses in the league, one of the best defenses in Europe at least right now, for 3 attacking players that are playing against relegation side opponents, at least, if not relegation, bottom 5, right? and I don't get a single attacking return from any of them, right? Like, no Semenyo, no Evan Nielsen, no João Pedro. Evan Nielsen had an assisting goal disallowed, right? João Pedro was pretty involved, and Semenyo missed several opportunities, had a hockey assist. It's just super frustrating that you have good players with good fixtures, and it's the shit players with shit fixtures that end up returning, and always right after you sell them. I mean, Wood is another example of that. Not that United are an incredible defense, but I certainly would have not picked him to be a differential this week, and he was one of the ones that killed me.
Yeah, you mentioned like probably the three weirdest teams this year: Brighton, Bournemouth, and Nottingham Forest. Like, Brighton have looked great. What are they? 6th, 5th in the table currently. They drew against Ipswich, they drew against Southampton, and they drew against Leicester. Like, have not beaten a single promoted side. And Bournemouth have, I was just checking the FBref table with expected goals for and against. Bournemouth are the second best team in the league based on expected goal differential, and it's crazy that they have essentially no viable FPL picks at the moment. Now, obviously, like, Semenyo's a pick, Evan Nielsen's a pick, but there's no, you would expect a team playing that well to have some standout, can't miss,
right? Like,
budget player, Solanke like type guy, and it just doesn't seem to be the case. And then Forrest, of course, have overperformed. Chris Wood has overperformed his XG. I sold Chris Wood too a couple weeks ago, but you and I talked about the fixtures, and it wasn't like he was a must sell, but it was definitely like these aren't the greatest.
It was a time to get off
fixtures.
Yeah, that was the jumping off point, and Wood had an incredible header, right? You can't fault them. You can fault the United defense there, but it's just one of those where it's just super frustrating the way that it all shook out at the end. I mean, we did get a hockey assist from Flecken, but he also gave up like 4 fucking goals, so it really took away any sort of benefit from that. I think he got a yellow card too. So it's just like thanks for trying and doing everything you could to get more than 2 points, but you sure took the long way around. And, like, Rodgers got a yellow card in like the very last possible second in that match. It's just a lot of frustrating things that keep happening. There were a lot of people that brought Mazraoui in, and he got yanked in the 50th minute last game, and then this past game he didn't even start. And I don't know if that was him getting rested or if Amarim's going to rotate a lot of players. He's still trying to figure out kind of where he wants to, but a lot to be frustrated these last 2 game weeks, that's for sure.
Now, having said all of that, I mean, you went from like 600K to 150K, and it looks like you're finally getting some juice out of Holland. No hauls, but at least 2 weeks with returns, which has been an improvement. What did you think of his performance against Crystal Palace? Because watching that live, that was a game that he could have had a hat trick. And both teams defensively were, I felt like, quite poor.
Like, I'm pretty frustrated because when Holland does return, it's not enough to outweigh the opportunity cost of not having like a Saka for that, right? Because maybe Saka didn't get the assist last time, which was this week was nice. I don't think he returned this week, right?
I'm glad you brought that up because I was going to say, like, coincidentally with your green arrows, 2 Saka blanks, 2 Holland returns.
Yeah.
It seems like those are the 2 guys maybe to keep an eye on.
Yeah, and that's my thing that I just couldn't get the bounce from a couple weeks ago, which really added to the frustration of, it's not only that my guys aren't returning, it's that the guys I don't have are returning. So it feels like, it's going doubly against you. And even, way earlier on when I was starting to build those green arrows, like having a Foden, there were opportunities where a Saka wasn't returning or a Salah wasn't returning or a Palmer wasn't returning, but I also wasn't getting returns from my differential. So when you try and get, I guess, too tricky, and maybe that's what I was trying to do when, I made all those changes and thought I was putting out really good teams, was maybe I was thinking about it too hard or trying to be too, I don't know, too cheeky with it, but it is just kind of frustrating to go from like, oh, I just put out the best team that I've ever put out, and everybody but one person blanks, to a team where I'm like, this is the best team I can put out. I'm kind of locked with the transfers I can make. It's like it's good enough, and then you get a fucking 90-pointer one week and a 75-pointer the next week.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, well maybe I should stop trying. You know what I mean? Like, it seems like it's just there's a point here of marginal utility for effort put into FPL, and it's very low.
I remember somebody showing some analysis where essentially the points that you earn are negatively correlated with the transfers that you make. So the more transfers that you make in a given game week, even before hits, like the less points you earn on average, which I think is hilarious. But really though, like, again, your scores have been better. They were worse a couple weeks ago. Is there a lesson, or is it just, yeah, I had some variance and it went against me for a few weeks. Now it's going for me, and we go from here.
That's the problem. Is I don't know if you watch South Park, but it seems like early on they got really like self-aware. We're like, okay, this is the point where we learn a lesson and we explain what the lesson is that we learned, and then we don't listen to that lesson for the rest of the show. Like, we don't actually listen to it. We didn't actually learn anything, and we never will. And that's kind of how I feel right now, is like, you and I will say, well, I should have done this, and next time I'll do this. But the reality is, like, it's probably not going to matter or make a difference. We can, like, I've learned some things with FPL, right? Like, if there's potential for a game to get canceled, make sure your who's my vice captain actually does matter. Who's first on my bench does matter, right? Especially in the defenders when you're playing a back three, things like that, right? That come with playing the game. But I think after a certain point, you're just kind of at the mercy of the game itself. And I guess maybe just try not to take it too seriously. I don't know.
Yeah, especially when the game weeks are coming so quickly. Like, it can
Yeah.
you can be like, oh my God, my game week was incredible. And then like, oh my God, my game week was terrible. My team sucks within like 3 days. And that can be a little bit of a whiplash. And, you're right. In most cases, active managers, your team is going to be fine. Like, even when you didn't score as many points or you scored a lot of points, there's no like, wow, that guy is a problem in your team. And some people might look at defenders, be like, this guy's gotten 1.5 weeks in a row, but that's kind of the baseline for that position. All the premiums are performing well. Like, it's really just some marginal gains on captaincy and some marginal gains on who's your budget forward, who's your third and fourth midfielder. Like, those are the week to week arrows right now, it seems like to me.
I mean, the differentials, like, yeah, they make a difference, but at the end of the day, you're not going to get the differential right every week, because in reality, you only get 1 or 2 transfers a week. And like you just said, you on average lose points when you make transfers. To me, it's kind of like going to class in college, right? University. If you go to class, right, to do the bare minimum, you'll at least get a C, right? Like, if you just set your team every week, make a transfer here and there, you'll probably end up in the top 1 million of players in the world, I mean, there's some incredible teams out there right now that haven't made a transfer yet. They haven't used a chip, haven't made a transfer.
I think next season, you and I at the beginning of the season should illegally set up a second account and a second league and have a set and forget team, like, just for fun. Pick a captain for the whole season, pick a team for the whole season. That's your like 38-week team, and that's what you're going for. I mean, I had Haaland, Salah, Trent in my game week 1 team, and I think those 3 would be in my 38 game week team as well.
Don't even get me started on Trent, man. Like, I sold him and he returned the very next week. And then even though he didn't start this past game week, he still got on and got a return, right? So I'm kind of kicking myself for selling him. But I guess if I had him, I wouldn't have been able to get to Palmer. And I've certainly gained more points from Palmer than I lost from Trent. So,
yeah. Why don't we go over to my team, because I have a similar question. By the way, dude, no biggie. 13K right now.
With a player who got a red card on your team, which is kind of impressive.
Yeah, I'm gonna play 10 guys this week. Green arrow. So talk about bullshit variance. There you go. Same question. I'm looking at my team, and it's like, these guys are fine. I don't think I need any transfers. I held Mbuemo. That was like a big thing. I think a lot of people got rid. Of course, that's the week he scores, which is very classic FPL fashion, and I don't fault anybody that got rid of him. I don't think he looked particularly better in any way in this game week. He just happened to return, and I still don't know who the fourth best midfielder is, but I'm just like looking at my team. It's like, okay, who don't I have? And I feel like it's Trent, especially now that Liverpool has a double game week in the chamber, and he had 2 assists this last week, and I feel very lucky that he did not play against Everton this week.
Yeah, it's interesting because your captain of just you captaining Palmer was really the only point you got outside of Mbuemo. So
no, three returns. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
and 10
Lewis you can barely call a return, right? Because can we talk about the FPL enigma that is Rico Lewis?
Dude, it was. I wish you were with me watching that game because City blew the clean sheet in the first 5 minutes. I was like, well, there's another like 1-pointer. Then he gets the yellow card. I'm like, dude, he tries to defend. He's just too small. He just cannot win the ball off of anyone at any point. And then second half, because they're losing, he's playing ahead of Haaland for like the majority of the half. And you're like, holy shit, like this guy's incredible. And he scores the goal, and I was like, yes. And I was like fist pumping. Then he got the second yellow. I forgot he got the first one. And then the ref like pulls out the red. Oh my God. Like the guy stuffed the stat sheet for sure. But his positioning this game was great. Now I'm like, well, shit. Like, should I really sell him? Goal or no goal? Like, he was the furthest player up the pitch for City at various points in the game when they were trailing, which they, may very well be trailing again. So, yeah, I don't know. What did you see from him?
Yeah, there were several times during that game where I was like, ugh, I wish I had Rico Lewis, and thank God I don't have Rico Lewis. I was going to both ends of the spectrum for everything you just mentioned. He was forward, he was getting a lot of touches in the opposition box, and he just looks lively and energetic. But at the same time, he really did everything he could do to score FPL points and lose FPL points all at once. I'm glad we weren't together, Chris, because if we were together, that means we would have been together for the Chelsea-Spurs match, which I don't know if I would have been able to control myself.
I would love to talk more about the game week and especially that match, because I think these two teams are just, as I said to you over text, they're incapable of playing a normal game. And speaking of all the emotions in a 90-minute period, that was certainly it.
I've calmed down since yesterday. I was pretty upset after the game yesterday because it was pretty typical Tottenham, and we can't just lose. We also have to lose and have 3 players get injured and give away 2 penalties when we really didn't have to. On one hand, I'm thankful that I am benefiting from the Cole Palmer points. On the other hand, it was just a really winnable game from Spurs that just came from kind of poor in-game management and execution by the players. I mean, open play XG, Tottenham were almost 1.5 ahead of Chelsea if you take away the penalties.
Yeah, I mean, overall, honestly, I was and remain impressed from Spurs, and I've heard some, is Postecoglou under pressure, and I don't think he should be whatsoever. I think they have demonstrably improved from last season without adding much Premier League level talent outside of Solanke. They did go by Archie Gray, Bergvall, Odebear, right? But those are future prospects. Those are guys that are not in the 11 right now. And I don't know. I feel like they're solid with the exception of Sarr and Basuma in the midfield. Just had a nightmare game. The penalties aside, Palmer had acres of space every time that he got the ball.
In that second penalty, I mean, he kind of made our back line his bitch. Like, he took the ball. His ball control was exceptional in that moment, and I just don't know what Sarr and Basuma are doing in those situations where they, you know what I mean? It's just, for professional footballers, like, that is just almost unforgivable to lose your cool in that area because the penalty spot is, the penalty box is sacred. Everyone knows to be careful around there. But you hit a few points, and I think that's what most people are concerned with is Spurs keep signing players for the future and no players for the now. There's no mix, right? And I know we have a lot of injuries and people suspended like Bentancur, but at the end of the day, I think most fans are behind Postecoglou and really just want to see change at the higher level of the club. I can tell you, I'd much rather lose these games while we're playing entertaining football than hold on to 1-1 draws with like a Conte or a Nuno.
From the Chelsea standpoint, I agree they're not title contenders. I think they're comfortably the third or fourth best team in the league, depending on how City are playing that week.
Yeah.
I think there's a pretty large gap between them and Villa, Spurs, Newcastle, kind of in that next tier. And we'll see how Spurs finish the season. We talked about how good their underlying numbers are. I think they could easily get back into that conversation.
We're underperforming a lot on our XG this season. The good news for Chelsea is most teams would look at where you're at and say, oh, you don't need more players. You're in a great spot. You're competing. But Chelsea aren't afraid to spend money. So I would imagine you'll still get reinforcements in January and in the summer transfer window too.
I don't think that they would look to add anybody to the first team squad at this point. I think they will continue to buy, but it'll probably be like project or developmental players. There has been talk of, like, obviously Reece James continues to have injury issues, so there's a need for a backup right back and maybe a center back behind Colwell, Disasi, Badiashile, who I thought Badiashile actually was pretty good in this one, but there's not a like set and forget type guy in their back line. And Sanchez has been criticized by the fans because of his bad distribution play. He gave you guys another chance today, but he's been a good shot stopper. And they have already signed Jorgensen, and then they have another guy from Genk, Penders, that's supposed to be a good prospect, and Solanina on loan. So they already have goalkeepers. It's just a matter of who gets the minutes. The most important question I have for you, Enzo Fernandez post-divorce statistics.
Dude.
9 goal involvements in 6 games. So my question is, how much better at your job would you be if you weren't married?
It's like the Kyle Walker post-infidelity statistics,
Yeah.
Like there's correlation here. I don't know if there's causation, but I would be the opposite, I feel like. I would be much worse at my job if I left my wife.
Bringing it back to FPL, do you think he's the third best Chelsea pick behind Palmer and Jackson? He was one of the most transferred in players after this game week against Spurs. 4.9, or maybe he went up to 5.0, but Rodgers, Semenyo, ESR have not been good. Maybe Enzo is kind of the next budget enabler. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, maybe you could go there. I'm a little concerned about his minutes and some of the statements Maresca has made in the past about choosing to go with Fernandez over other midfielders and vice versa. So I don't know if he's still tweaking and figuring out who his league teams are and who his non-league teams are, but I know there was some beef between the two of them early on, and I don't know if that's fully gone away. The only concern I really have, Chris, is a minutes concern. But outside of that, I think he's proven that he can get goal contributions when he's in. And I don't think Chelsea have a problem with scoring.
Yeah, I guess you could say the same thing about like Mbuemo at Brentford, and maybe this is a little bit abstract, is like player can have a down period, but the team is continuing to score 2, 3, 4 goals per game week. I do see that a little bit with Chelsea, where Enzo might not necessarily get a return every single week like he has for the last 4 or 5 weeks, but the team offensively is so good, and it does seem like Maresca has gotten through to him in terms of, hey, I need you in the box to score goals. We said that exact thing, right? He coached him. He specifically said, you cannot score goals if you are not in the box, so get in the box, and that does bear out on the heat map. I don't know if he's an FPL pick yet or not, but if you have him as a 5th mid and you only need to start him, once every 4 or 5 games, or in a good fixture for Chelsea, they do have an excellent fixture run.
Yeah, if you want to replace Rodgers or Semenyo or invest in Mbuemo money elsewhere, I don't see an issue with that at all. The fixtures definitely pass the eye test.
Yeah. I don't know that I would go sideways from Rogers, Semenyo, ESR unless that delta gives you another move. If you could go Rogers to Enzo and like maybe get Trent, as much as I think downgrading to get defender maybe this year has not borne out, that seems good. But if you're just straight up, I think Enzo is a better pick than Rogers, I would pump the brakes. Like I don't think that that's necessarily the case. People might also be looking at Chelsea defenders, and I just don't think that their defense is solid enough, nor do they have any defenders with attacking output consistently enough to warrant a pick. But I guess you could still go with Colwell. I just think Sanchez's days are maybe numbered.
Yeah, I agree. I don't know that I'd go there. But also, there's not really a good defender in the game right now that's consistent. So, shoot your shot.
Where do you want to go next? I've got a couple questions, but I'm curious what's on your mind.
Go to United in Forest. I think we had some observations during this match. Wood still in form. Fernandez back on the score sheet, and we've got some potential attacking options for United. They've got a tough fixture run coming up, but we got some more information on the Amorim project. Did you learn anything here?
Yeah, who do you think is the fourth best midfielder? Because I think now it's Bruno.
I keep going back and forth on is he involved in the attack and is he not involved in the attack? I think in the first half, I was a little skeptical, where I was like, it feels like he's playing like a CDM, maybe not getting in the box, and maybe some of that was some decision-making from the players. But when they went down and in the second half, it was like, okay, they're only going to get back into this game through Bruno. So then I swung the other way, so I'm still not convinced about the best fourth midfielder, but after this fixture run, you see more of the Amorim project. You can definitely make a case for it,
The other guy was Ahmad. Seems to be getting in a lot of teams. Was 5 million, 5.1. Reverse out of position, which is bad because he's a midfielder.
He was definitely more forward than he was back, and he's young and he's got that energy to do both. So, like you said, reverse out of position. I mean, to me, the good thing is he's not losing a point every time United concede 2 goals.
That's true. So, and on the bonus points, too. That doesn't hurt.
On the bonus points, it doesn't hurt. But 2 assists, right?
Yeah.
To me, I go to Ahmad before I go to Bruno in my team. But again, the fixture run is tough. I think Ahmad's going to lock that spot in. I think Amorim likes him, and Garnacho was the one being pulled. I don't mind it necessarily. He's getting forward. He's getting in the box. I think he's young. He needs to get better at decision-making. Outside of that, I think he's definitely, to me, I'd more likely go to him than any other United asset out there right now.
What do you think about him versus Enzo? So
Enzo's got the better fixture run.
Okay, so you think Enzo, then maybe that's the sideways to Ahmad if you have a luxury transfer later. Okay, I like that. If you're downgrading, I could see that. Yeah, Chris Wood. So like a few weeks ago, 2 weeks ago, I don't know how many game weeks, 2 real life weeks ago, I sold Chris Wood to get João Pedro, which later got me to Nick Jackson. I kept Cunha. Cunha's now had, 3 blanks in a row after 2 mega hauls, and I tweeted this. I don't think I regret selling Wood for Cunha yet, because Cunha still has Ipswich and a couple other good fixtures after that, but it's getting close. I kind of wish that I had kept Chris Wood and not Mateus Cunha, given his form. I mean, the guy is just like Mr. Consistent up top.
I agree. I mean, I thought his form would drop, but he's still figuring out ways to score, especially from low percentage areas,
He really only needs like one chance.
Yeah.
It's like 1 shot, 1 goal, which is weird. Right. You look at his numbers and you're like, oh, he's not getting the ball. He's not shooting. Time to get rid. But then it's just like cross header goal and 8 points.
You talk about Cunha. He's one of those where I'm glad I didn't have the knee-jerk reaction transfer to. Do we go to Wolves and West Ham next? Because I think you're asking midfielders and attackers. On the flip side of this fixture, a lot of people have gone to Jared Bowen, and they regretted it in the last match because he probably should have had 2 goals and an assist and ended up with nothing. But this match, he came good even though he had an assist called offside. I think he ended up with a goal and an assist. So where do you rank Bowen in your power rankings here for a differential attacker.
You basically read my mind. I was going to talk about FPL justice for the people that went Jared
Yeah.
Bowen in game week 14. So he had home to Arsenal, game week 14, away Leicester. A lot of people went Mbuemo to Bowen or some variation of that. 1.62 goal involvements, no returns. Wolves home, 1 goal, 1 assist, 0.32 expected goal involvement, so way outperformed. And I'm assuming he's about to get 3 bonus points tacked on here as well. So kudos to those that went Jared Bowen. I'm sorry it didn't work out in the Leicester fixture, but the FPL gods balanced that account for you. In terms of Jared Bowen as a pick, I'm just not sure what they're going to do with Lopetegui.
Yeah.
But you got to think that any manager coming into West Ham is an improvement at this point. So to me, I think he's a great pick. 7.4 if you're tired of Mbuemo or you can't get to Fernandez. I don't see why not. There's nothing about how he's playing that makes me think he's not a good pick.
Well, especially with the tragic Mikel Antonio incident,
Right.
thankfully he's okay. Bowen would start in the 9 position today, so out of position midfielder. And I think I read where when he plays as a 9, he has a 60% chance of a return versus when he plays on the wing, he's got a 50% chance. So
okay,
as long as he is, I don't know how long Antonio is going to be out, but if that's the case and Bowen is playing in the 9 role, I like him more than I like Mbuemo at this point because Bowen's going to be looking to get in the box and in the goals. Whereas, again, Mbuemo just kind of out of out of where you think he is. I mean, even his assist came from, I think he played that ball at, the halfway line. But that's just where my head's at right now.
do you think that that's worth is Bowen enough of an upgrade to be worth a transfer? I'm just looking at the fixtures. Bournemouth away, which is tough. Brighton at home, which the official Fantasy Premier League site has as a 2 on the FDR. Obviously, we don't believe that. He does have away to Southampton in game week 18, and then it's home to Liverpool, away to Man City. It doesn't look that great from a next 5 fixture standpoint. Maybe the time to get him in was game week 14, and you mentioned it earlier. Maybe the boat has sort of sailed. I don't know if I can get there on a sideways transfer from Mbuemo unless it unlocks something else for your team, which it wouldn't because Bowen is more expensive.
If we're talking about Mbuemo, Bowen definitely has the better fixtures, I think. So, like I said, if you want to differentiate yourself, Mbuemo's 30% owned right now, and Bowen is 6%, 7% owned. If you're trying to make a move, I don't hate it. Maybe it's only got 3 weeks of life, but sometimes that's all you need.
Yeah, fair enough. Other thing I wanted to talk to you about is defense. I've got some defensive problems here. Rico Lewis, red card suspension. Gabriel is not in the squad. Greaves is not in the squad. It's really funny that defenders are so bad that I think taking a 0 and banking a transfer is better than using a transfer on a defender to get 1 or 2 points. But my question is, we definitively know that Arsenal and Liverpool are the 2 best defenses in the league. Should we have 3 defenders from those teams?
I just don't know. I mean, in my head, Chris, I'm looking differential because at least if someone does score, then you're going to really take leaps and bounds. Whereas you're just kind of hoping for the clean sheets, and that just hasn't really been the case this season. Historically, there hasn't been a ton of clean sheets. I mean, like you said, Trent didn't start this last game. Bradley didn't even start this last game, right? So you can't even guarantee that he's going to be the cheap replacement. So I just don't know what's more important, is kind of hoping that the best defenses return a clean sheet and your player plays, or having a guy is going to play and might have some goal or assist threat and going the cheaper route that way. I just don't know if there's a huge difference this year.
I think the way to look at it is Mbuemo's a good example that a lot of people are getting rid of. I have him. I would have to downgrade Mbuemo to upgrade a defender to Trent. The question is the configuration, and is it actually worth the transfers to do that? Because defenders might score a little bit more points, but whatever midfielder you're giving up, like an Mbuemo, even when they're out of form, it seems like are going to come good eventually versus the defense. So I'm struggling a little bit with that in terms of like team configuration, I think.
I will go back to what I said earlier in that I hate not having Trent, but at the same time, I have gotten leaps and bounds more points from having Palmer than I would have if I owned Trent for these weeks. I like what having the cheap defenders enables in the midfield more, just because they seem to be more high-scoring players this season, especially with Haaland being out of form. That's just kind of my 2 cents there. So, yeah, like I said, it sucks not owning Trent or a Liverpool defender or even a Gabriel. But that's where my head is at.
The points just aren't there. There's not enough points to justify downgrading a midfielder. There's not enough points to even justify multiple transfers within the defensive line, I think, to get to the guys you want. You'd have to use 2 at that point, and I'd rather just bank. But it just, watching Trent come off the bench and get 2 assists in game week 14, knowing that he had Everton next week, I was very, very close to downgrading Mbuemo to Morgan Rogers against Southampton, having Trent for the Everton game. And obviously that would have been a disaster given what happened.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking.
All right, Jace, let's move on to transfers and captaincy. What's going on with Team Jace this week? Do you have 1 or 2 transfers in the bank?
I have 1 because I brought in João Pedro. I, like you, was looking at my defense to use my transfer this week because when I go to pick my team, I like a lot of the fixtures, right? A lot of Ipswich, Leicester home, Everton home, Tottenham home. Just kidding. A lot of my players have home fixtures, so I was looking kind of at an opportunity to maybe make a defensive improvement just for future fixtures. But there's no one really I'm trying to go out there and get right now. I think it would be nice to have a second goalie option because I am kind of stuck with playing Flecken every week. And there is going to come a time where he has horrible fixtures consistently, and I don't really have an option there. So that's where my head's at right now. I've made a lot of changes in the attack kind of recently, so I want to see those play out. So I don't want to make any knee-jerk reactions. I know João Pedro didn't return. Neither did Evanilson or Semenyo, but again, they both got West Ham at home, and João Pedro has Crystal Palace at home. So yeah, I'm looking at the defense or just rolling a transfer at the moment.
Yeah. You're sticking with Haaland.
Yeah, I have to at this point. He's a huge differential for me, I feel like, this week in competitive teams because he was only, 7.9% owned?
7% owned on FPL review and the other teams right now.
So to me, I think he's a differential. And again, he's got United at home this week. I know Amorim got the better of City with Sporting earlier in the season, but he got a goal. City are starting to find some form. Kevin De Bruyne, who we didn't even really talk about, is getting returns left and right. So
2 starts, which was crazy.
Yeah. So with him, I mean, Haaland could have had several goals. Like you said, he could have had a hat trick in that fixture. I know we didn't talk much about it, so I'm sticking with Haaland for sure.
I do like him as a differential, and I think I like him even more.
Which is crazy to say in the context of last 2 FPL seasons.
I agree. One thing I'll say, though, is obviously, like, Saka blanked the last 2 weeks, and it is really for you, I feel like, Haaland versus Saka. Saka's got Everton at home, which is, a good fixture for them.
Great fixture.
Palmer has Brentford at home. Salah has Fulham at home. So this is a week where you really need Haaland to beat out at least one of those 3 guys. And for you, particularly Saka, but for others, it might be Palmer, right? Depending on who has what. All right, Team Chris, also pretty good looking squad for next week. Really the only tough fixture in the front 8 is Mbuemo at Chelsea. Everybody else is at home to a bottom half side, so feel pretty good there. Defensively is a little trickier with Gabriel missing out. Aina does have Villa at home, so he'll probably start. And then Rico Lewis is red flagged because of the red card. Mikolenko is away to Arsenal, and Jacob Greaves is away to Wolves, and also was not in the squad. So right now I have a back three of Gabriel, Aina, and Greaves with Mikolenko and Lewis on the bench. The question is whether I want to use one of my 2 transfers to try and address that, or again, see if I can just play with potentially 10 players in the starting lineup this week if everybody's out. What would you do in my shoes? I'm leaning towards another rolled transfer this week.
How many transfers do you have? 2?
I have 2. So I'd get up to 3 for the second time this season, which feels pretty good. Feels very powerful to have 3 free transfers on the bank.
I think the real question is there any defender you can go get that you would want to start this week and miss that fixture? The answer is no. Then, yeah, I don't see the point. I would imagine if Mbuemo blanked last week, then you would probably look to get him out this week. But since he returned, it's probably not worth the transfer, especially if the logic holds, like you said a couple weeks ago, on he's a big game player. When he's got a tougher team, he's going to be more important and involved in the attack. And against Chelsea, that'll hold true.
I think that's true. I also think for my team particularly, because I have Semenyo, who's home to West Ham, and 3 strikers with good fixtures, and Mbuemo actually goes to the bench this week, and therefore not necessarily worth a transfer to get rid of him. The guy, again, that I think I'm missing is Trent in defense. Liverpool have Fulham at home. Then they have, I believe, a couple of tougher fixtures after that. Away to Spurs. Home Leicester, away West Ham. Okay, so I guess not. Liverpool's fixtures are actually quite good. But I don't yet know, because Semenyo has not been very good, whether a downgrade of Mbuemo actually makes sense for my team, or if there's Bowen or Brennan Johnson, who we didn't talk about, but I actually
came off injured.
Come off injured.
Yeah.
But we don't know how serious that is yet. Nothing has been
true.
confirmed, so it could just be a knock. But he's been very good, right?
Very, very good.
Yeah. There's just not a clear answer at that 4th mid spot with my current team. So for me, I think just bench Mbuemo, get some more information, and see if anybody throws their hat into the ring next week.
Yeah, I think that's a solid plan. That was the plan last week too, right? Worked out okay.
Jumping over to captaincy for next week, game week 16, projected points: Palmer, number 1 with 8.0, home to Brentford. Salah, number 2, 7.6, home to Fulham. Haaland, as you mentioned, has Man United at 6.9, and Saka has Everton with 6.2 projected points. Son and Isak also in there as well. I'm surprised that you said Palmer was your guy, because a couple of weeks ago you said form over fixtures, and you absolutely nailed it. Solid triple return in game week 14. So what's the thought process here?
I've really had a bad time betting against Fulham recently. I think their defense is good. I don't think they concede a ton of goals, and Salah is kind of the the offense for Liverpool. So I think if you can shut him down, like maybe Robinson can, like he did with Saka, then I think Palmer just has more routes to points, and Brentford have conceded the most. I don't want to say they've conceded the most, but they've conceded a lot of goals this season. I think the G-Tech has been home to the most goals this season, if I'm not mistaken. I like Palmer better in that scenario, and that's why I'm going with him. I like the fixture. I'm surprised Saka is as low as he is for expected points, especially against Everton at home. So if I had Saka, I think I'd captain Saka, but I don't, so I think captain Palmer.
Brentford have the 4th highest expected goals against in the league.
Yeah.
The only teams worse than them are the 3 promoted teams: Southampton, Ipswich Town, and Leicester City. And I totally agree with you about Fulham. Robinson historically has played pretty well.
Really well.
Against Salah. Yeah. At the same time, 2 weeks ago, we got this totally wrong, but it did seem like, based on, well, I did.
You did, yeah.
But based on the underlying numbers, even in game week 14, Palmer, in theory would have outscored Salah despite what actually happened. So I'm with you. Palmer's my captain this week as well. Don't see that changing against Brentford at home, and hoping for some Nick Jackson points this week as well.
You haven't got a lot of Nick Love, have you?
Yeah, after a blank and a 2-pointer against Tottenham, I think this is the week where he gets back on track, similar to Isak against Brentford. So we'll see. Before we go, just want to remind folks of the upcoming deadlines, given that we are in the festive fixture period. So Game Week 16 is a normal deadline. That's this Saturday, the 14th. And I think we do have European competition midweek this week as well, so something to keep an eye on. Game Week 17 is the following Saturday, which is the 21st. And then Game Week 18 is a midweek deadline on Boxing Day, the 26th, before Game Week 19 on the 29th. So as we start to see more players get rotated, European competition, cup competitions continue, definitely make sure you've got the alerts set on for the app so you don't miss a deadline. And with that, just a final reminder to rate, review, and subscribe to our show on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your shows. We really appreciate any reviews and ratings. That's how people discover our podcast. We're also on Twitter and Instagram at FPL_freehitpod. And you can join us next week to recap Game Week 16 and look forward to Game Week 17. Good luck, everybody.